is the Chief Information Technology Officer at Shippensburg University in South Central Pennsylvania, where he has worked for the past 15 years. He has a PhD in Instructional Design and Technology from Old Dominion University, and he conducts research in the management of cognitive load by instructional design practitioners as they implement instructional technologies or instructional strategies in multiple domains for learners, excuse me, with varying levels of expertise. Justin completed the Quality Matters Teaching Online certificate in fall of 2020 with a cohort of faculty from his institution, and in his own words, he geeked out over the material the entire time. So Justin, we're pleased to have you today. Welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it. I had to respond in chat to Heather, a fellow ODU grad. So let me bring up my presentation here. And Nancy, can you see that okay? I switched my my monitors like we did the other day, so I think we're good to go.
I can see it just fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. So good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're at. As Nancy mentioned, appreciate everyone's time, especially with semesters opening up. But this is our first week of classes, and I know a lot of folks, if you're not starting this week, you're likely starting next week. So a lot of preparation goes into that. Appreciate your time. Again, I'm Justin. I'm the CITO here at Shippensburg University, and yeah, I've been here for 15 years. It feels like a long time. So I've seen quite a few changes within our institution, and this is sort of a snapshot of where we've been over the last couple of years. We've been QM institutional members that entire time, so that's some of the context. But today, talking about how we used the teaching online certification training to do more than just train faculty, but try to implement institutional change during a difficult time that we all face within higher education. And again, this I see this very much as telling a story and not just giving a presentation. So please feel free to ask questions or make comments in the Q&A or chat, and I'd much prefer to address those as we go, as opposed to you having to save it till the end. So please feel free to ask questions. So I think these objectives were included in the email, but just sort of a high level view of what I'm hoping we can accomplish here. And again, if you all want to hear about different things, please let me know, and I can fill in the blanks. But one of the goals is to identify how we encourage faculty to participate in frankly, a rigorous training, and that was the intent. We wanted rigorous, meaningful training, something that was not historically looked upon favorably, not something that people were really enthusiastic about pre-pandemic. Another objective is to talk about how we specifically use the cohort approach to the TOC training, and that's something that I wasn't even familiar with until I started to look into what our options were. But that in particular is something that we use to get a sense of camaraderie during, again, a difficult time during the pandemic, but also encourage collaboration among our faculty members here at the institution. Third is, and this gets to the institutional change piece, the training not only benefited the individual faculty who were taking the training, but it also helped us as an institution with looking at how we had to change policies or procedures, and really getting a sense of how we could come up with a common language and vision moving forward for distance education, for online education, and that sort of thing. And then finally, we can wrap up, and there's, like anything else, just as many challenges as there are opportunities, but talking about some of the things that we identified coming out of this training, in addition to the positive experience that it was, what we have ahead of us, and how this training really fits into that. So with that in mind, just some basic background. Shippensburg University is our institution. It's I think the full name is Shippensburg University of Pennsylvania. We are part of the state system of higher education here in Pennsylvania. For anyone that's not in the Mid-Atlantic region or familiar, that does not mean that we're Penn State. That's a different thing altogether. We are, after some integrations this year, I think we're saying that we're 10 institutions. Used to say that it was 14, but a couple of the institutions combined this past year. But we are primarily a traditional student population, mostly face-to-face instruction, traditional age students. We do have graduate programs and a few online programs, but mostly traditional age. Right around 5,000 students head count at this point. The second bullet point here, and I don't know if certainly if there are others in the same boat, maybe drop it into the chat or what have you. But an important aspect of at least the beginning of this story is that all of our faculty are members of APSCUF, which is basically the faculty union. We have 3 major bargaining units on campus for either faculty or staff. The reason that's important is that training requirements and the like are collectively bargained. So the notion of mandatory training is quite different from other institutions, either private institutions or public institutions without a unionized faculty. I have experience with institutions that don't have this set up, but this is sort of a hurdle to get over sometimes. But for example, a type of training that's collectively bargained is something like Title IX training. So that's actually in the CBA with faculty, and that'll become relevant as I get into the story. Online courses up until, so this is sort of a snapshot of where we were in 2020. All of our online courses are typically limited to winter and summer terms, which are shortened terms outside of the regular academic year, fall and spring. Not a lot of any courses required for majors are not offered online, and they are not offered during the academic year. So a student can't take primarily face-to-face classes and then have an online course or two based on scheduling during the academic semester. Like, I suppose, pretty much everyone else, all of our courses shifted to online in March of 2020 until August of 2020, the following academic year. So through the summer of 2020 due to COVID. And I don't know if at this point people have seen enough presentations to think, oh, here we are with another COVID origin story. But I very much believe in the concept of never letting a good crisis go to waste. So this is important that this is where this came from. In 2021, so not last academic year, but the one before, the first full academic year of the COVID pandemic, we did offer our undergraduate courses in online, hybrid, and high flex modalities. And that term is a dicey one, depending on who you talk to. People have different ideas about what that means. But that was unprecedented for our institution, obviously, as a primarily face-to-face. And I know a lot of institutions are in that same boat. 21-22, last year, we returned mostly to our typical mix of modalities, so primarily face-to-face, but a little bit more flexibility, and I'll get into that as well, and how that was addressed in context of the training. So what started all of this is, what started a lot of stories recently, and it was COVID. So I'll never forget, and I'm sure most of you won't, how that went down. We were, I believe, just entering spring break, and we saw the tides shifting and where it was headed, and it was one of those, hey, the call from the provost. Hey, we need to prepare our faculty for the possibility of delivering online. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, we hadn't done a lot of that training in the past, so our faculty were not necessarily uniformly trained on how to deliver instruction online. But we had a whole week and a half to do it. So we had feverishly putting together the Zoom sessions, and there were 3-4 hour sessions. I think a lot of people did the same thing. A lot of people showed up, folks that were pretty well versed in online instruction, and those that had never done it before and just wanted to get a sense of how to keep afloat. We were not prepared. A lot of the faculty were not prepared. Obviously, they didn't write it into their syllabus at the beginning of January. What we'll do if we have to move from face-to-face to online. So there were a lot of questions about how do we deliver quality instruction online. And this is coming out of the context in the past of a large portion of our faculty saying that they didn't think that instruction can be delivered in a quality fashion online. And again, I think that conversation swirls around a lot of campuses, especially those without a lot of online programs. So we made it through the spring semester, as most campuses did, and considering the situation, we actually did pretty well. We got through it, and there was a lot of we survived that, and we made it work. But we really started to take stock right after commencement. What did we learn? Where are we headed? We don't know where this pandemic is going to go. So I received a call that week from our university president at the time, and a couple things. One was from the infrastructure perspective. If we had to deliver online courses over the summer and into the fall, through technology, how many classrooms can we broadcast from? As an aside, the answer at the time was 6, and I was asked, well, okay, so what would it take to ramp up to 100? And that I had to call some of my directors, and after they hung up, and I called them back, we came up with a plan for that. But the other piece of that was, hey, we need, because the faculty are saying that they want to make sure that they deliver quality online instruction, we need a third-party certification to make this happen. We need an independent party to help us with online instruction. At the time, I said, hey, that's great. I mean, this is something that we've talked about for a long time, but never really implemented. How many faculty do you think we should start with? And the answer was all of them. And that number at the time was 282 faculty members that we wanted to get them certified in online instruction right away. And I'll go back to my previous comment. It is a unionized faculty, and we couldn't require it. So that was the other wrinkle. I was supposed to use my charming demeanor to talk all 282 into doing it willingly. So this was the challenge put in front of us. Before I move off this slide, just a shout out to Tom Wilson, one of my partners in crime during doctoral program. If you weren't aware that there are instructional designer, instructional technology cartoons on the internet, CaptainBigIdea.com is a good place to get those, and it's good for a chuckle if you're an instructional designer. but that was very much where we were in that life raft in 2020, I think, like a lot of other people, and saying this, this looks a lot different than that ocean liner that's going by. So as far as where we were, so a little bit more of the context when this request came down from the top, what we had faculty doing in terms of online teaching prior to the pandemic. Our online courses and programs, which are largely either non-credit or graduate, are run through our professional continuing and distance education group. That group administers those courses, and that's something that's in flux right now. We're actually looking at changing that and putting that back within the departments, perhaps at some point. But at the time, that's the group that would get faculty to teach courses. There was a requirement there because these were, and again, this is like on load versus off load, but because of the way the compensation is set up, that group did require a level of training before a faculty member could teach an online course. That had been around since 2004. I was looking at the list the other day. We, over time, I think we had trained about 175, 200 faculty members in that. That started out as a training course that was, again, we're in the PA state system of higher ed. It was a collaboration among 5 or 6 of the 14 at the time. And we would sort of trade off, one institution would lead a module, another one would lead another module. That was a 5-week training, and a lot of faculty would opt to do that in the summer. And it, for what it was, it worked well. It went on for, I think we were in it for about 10 years. One thing that it turned into is, we kind of put faculty through the paces. And it was a little too, we would kind of nickel and dime, like you had to get a certain number of points in each module to move to the next one. And I never liked being the person that had to tell a faculty member that they needed 237 points and they had 236 and they couldn't move on to the next module or whatever it was. It was a little tedious. So in 2013, 2014, locally, we worked with our faculty and said, look, we know that this isn't really working for everyone. It's not terribly flexible. We're not taking into account previous experience and that sort of thing. So let's look at doing something locally. I was very familiar with Quality Matters and some of the things that we had done with the organization. So I definitely was in favor of having this local training based on Quality Matters principles. Now, again, it was very much abbreviated, not anywhere near what the TOC training is. But we developed something called Online Instruction 100, OLI 100. That became our new requirement, and we had been using that for about 5 or 6 years pre-pandemic. We put that directly within our learning management system, which now is D2L Brightspace. We were previously a Blackboard institution. I'm not here to endorse any particular LMS. All of this is agnostic. So that's where we were. We had this requirement, such as it was. It wasn't terribly intensive, but it was something. It was a baseline. It's this is how you do it if you've never done it before, and this is how you kind of get by and survive. And we helped faculty kind of set up their first online course through this mechanism. As I mentioned, we did have prior experience with Quality Matters. We've been, I don't know how many years, but we've been an institutional member for many, many years. Certainly during my entire tenure, 15 years, we've been an institutional member. We've had a few points of intersection with both our faculty and our staff. So our instructional designers have always become certified QM peer reviewers, which has been very helpful, both internally and then also looking at courses at other institutions has been great to be exposed to different approaches to things. There were a handful, and when I say handful, I mean I can count them on one hand, probably a handful of faculty in various departments that had become peer reviewers of their own volition in the past, just based on their own interest. It wasn't something that not a concerted effort. We periodically internally, our instructional design group use the QM rubric to evaluate courses for sort of like informal, if a faculty member came and said, hey, can you give me a sense, we would use that checklist and say, hey, this is why, we're doing it this way and this is what we're using. Again, nothing terribly rigorous, but, that was sort of our baseline. And our required training, as I mentioned before, the online instruction 100 that we developed was kind of used as a informal overview of QM standards. We kind of integrated. We didn't get really specific about standards, but we kind of based it on that, and the modules were built around that. So all of that to say that the training approach that we came up with. So when the president called and said that we wanted third-party certification, a few things, and again, there was some meeting that I don't think I was in, and a couple of people floated ideas that our LMS vendor had a certification. There were a couple other. I think somebody just Googled it and came up with some suggestions. And I said, now, the first thing that came to mind was, hey, we're Quality Matters members. We've always had a good experience with this organization, and they really are the gold standard for online instruction. And that's, let's leverage an existing relationship. And one thing that I told both my VP and the president was, if we're going to do this, I think we should do it right. I think we should do something that's a meaningful certification, that's rigorous and actually means something. And I got the go ahead, and I said, okay, well, that's, I hope you're sure, because there are implications, and I'll get into that as we get into what the training experience was like. As I mentioned, and again, I don't know how many folks on this call are familiar with it. The cohort approach, not something that I was familiar with. It wasn't until I sort of feverishly was looking around the Quality Matters site. We were told to do it quickly. So again, this was June of 2020. And there was even this notion of, well, can we get people certified before the semester starts in the fall? That was pretty difficult. But I thought, oh, let's look into this cohort approach. So that's when I met Nancy for the first time. I made that contact, and I said, look, I don't know what this looks like, but could you explain it to me? And there's a sense of urgency here. So what we decided to do, and again, I can't say enough about Quality Matters as an organization for helping us through this. We set up cohorts, and the first cohort started in late August, I believe it was. So that was a pretty quick turnaround, because I'm sure that QM got calls from a bunch of different institutions that all of a sudden had an interest in certification. We went with the cohort approach. We said, look, we'll try to get as many faculty that are interested in these cohorts, and we'll take them through together. The way I set it up, and I heard someone say, we want this done quickly. And I thought, oh, well, the best way to get it done quickly is to just run through it with no breaks. So there are, for those that aren't familiar with all the details, the Teaching Online certificate through Quality Matters, there are 7 workshops, and each workshop is either 1 week or 2 weeks. So if you add them all up, all 7 result in 11 weeks of training. Anyone that's not given a directive to do it as quickly as we did, or wants to preserve some level of sanity, probably wouldn't do it in 11 weeks straight. But that's what we did. And there's good and bad involved with that, and I can certainly go into that. But what we wanted to do is contain these within academic semesters. So say, hey, look, if you're going to sign up for this in the fall, it's going to be a lot of work during the semester, but you'll be done before the semester's over. Later on, we went with that same approach. Hey, if we do it in the summer and it's 11 weeks, you can get it done in the summer and then you'll be ready for the semester. And again, there's an upside and downside to both. If you do it during the academic semester, you have a whole lot going on. If you do it during the summer, you probably want to have less going on. And this is something that you maybe weren't bargaining for. But so that's what we did, an 11 weeks training straight through, and we could contain that within a 16-week semester. The cohort approach. The one other thing that we considered is there was hesitancy among some of our faculty that hadn't done a lot with online instruction to have conversations with other institutions, because you get into that situation where you'll have someone in a training that says, oh, well, we do X, Y, Z, and then the response is, well, we're not that far along. Good for you, but we're not even close to that. This isn't really meaningful to me. So we wanted to address both the concerns of faculty and sort of the current campus climate related to online learning, both within the context of the pandemic and the larger context. And cohorts really work well for that. So that, the upside of not using cohorts and having faculty go through the public training schedule is they do get best practices from other institutions, which certainly has an upside and a value. But this was something based on our time frame that we opted into. So generating interest, and this is something that we had some specific concerns, as I mentioned, with a faculty union and not being able to say, I've worked at private institutions and saying that something's required. Again, they said, oh, you can show the value and everybody will sign up, and it's like, well, that's quite quite a responsibility. So here's how I did it, and I think it worked pretty well. We had a spreadsheet. I'll address when I'm done with this slide. I'll get the question in the Q&A. We had a spreadsheet that showed every faculty member from 2003, 2004 that had been trained internally on online teaching. And I knew that, so again, it was about 200 people. I knew that the people at the bottom of the spreadsheet were the more enthusiastic, recently trained, the ones that were kind of maybe newer to the institution, were really into this. So I thought, okay, I'm going to start at the bottom of this sheet, and I'm going to invite the people that I think are going to say yes first to try to build some momentum here. And then I'm going to work backwards and get to the top of the list where I assume that these people are going to say, hey, look, I'm tenured, or I'm really busy. No thanks. And that worked pretty well. So we filled the first few cohorts from the bottom of that list with the sort of newer, enthusiastic people, the ones that I knew would really give it a go. And I invited them in batches to get the 20 registrations, at least on the first day. We had 20. Now, we did have some attrition, and I can talk about that as well. But we wanted to fill these cohorts, and I filled them with the willing to start. I think that honesty with faculty obviously is probably the best approach all the time. But I wanted to be upfront, like I am with everything else with faculty, especially when you're telling them something that they're probably not going to be maybe enthusiastic about or thrilled to hear. But I was going to tell them like it is. Look, I was asked to find a rigorous, meaningful training. This is what this is, but that's what this means. I did focus on the benefits. And again, the benefits are, there are many, right? There's the benefit to the individual. This is frankly, we don't want you to leave the institution, but it's a portable credential. You can take it wherever you go. It can benefit you, it can benefit your department, your students. and will also benefit the institution as a whole. I went into detail, and I'll show on the next screen, I have a little snapshot of the email, but I was very specific about the nature of the workshops. Again, there's the use of terminology in terms of synchronous, asynchronous, all those different things, trying to explain to them, this is kind of it's a work at your own pace, but that's only within the week or so of the workshop, and there are some sort of milestones that you hit. So it's work at your own pace, but I wanted to be upfront about that. The other thing, and I'll show this on the next slide, I wanted to very clearly tell them how much of their time this was going to take, especially if I was asking them to do this during an academic semester. And down to how many hours I think this will take you each week to prevent surprises. Now, there were some folks that signed up and were still surprised by the time commitment, even though I told them, but be that as it may, I wanted to be very, very clear. Before I go to the next slide, there's a question in Q&A from Peter. With instructional designers being QM peer review certified, is it a requirement or an expectation or institution that instructional designers teach online courses at the university? No, and that's not necessarily because of a particular philosophy beyond the. So back to the sort of the bargaining unit reality here at our institution. Our instructional designers are in one bargaining unit, and our faculty are in another. So the short answer is that our instructional designers cannot teach courses, generally speaking. I guess there have been instances where they have, but it's not really it couldn't be a job requirement based on how their positions are set up within their bargaining unit. That's something that that's an interesting possibility, and I guess the closest would be that the internal training, the online instruction training, is not completely asynchronous, so that the instructional designers do teach that in a sense. So they're pretty high touch with faculty in both developing and delivering that content. So the short answer is no, that there's not an expectation that the IDs teach courses. So hopefully that addressed that question. Thank you for that. So just a continuation of that last theme, how did I drum up support? I contacted faculty directly. So I did not spam the entire campus, all 282, and write a form letter and say, hey, whoever's interested, please let me know, because I don't think I would have had much uptake. I consistently said to the faculty, look, this is going to be a lot of work, but trust me, you're going to tell me when you're done that it was worth it, and then cross my fingers that they would do that. Based on the estimates, and again, the way we were doing it with 7 workshops over 11 weeks, and the estimates, and this is kind of small, but this is actually just sort of a screen grab of the email that I sent to faculty members, either individually or in small groups. It depended on the situation. I was very specific. I said, look, hey, September 1st through the 8th, this is the workshop you're going to do. This is how many hours I think it's going to take you. I totaled it up and I said, look, sometime during the semester, during an 11-week period, you're going to have to commit between 90 and 100 hours to both the sort of the material and the homework, or the discussion boards and that sort of thing. That's a lot. That's a lot of time when you sit down and calculate it. But I didn't want any surprises, because if you don't tell them up front, by the second week or so, they're going to say, hey, look, I didn't know it was all this, and just drop out anyway. So why not be honest up front? Again, as I mentioned before, I told them, look, this is a real credential. It's not tied to the institution. It's not tied to the learning management system specifically. This is about an industry standard within higher ed and education more generally that's recognized. And I did have to preface it with, the provost office is telling me to remind you that I don't want you to get the certification and leave per se. But a couple have left since training, and that's going to happen. But again, this is something that, faculty have put in their folders for promotion and tenure and list on their CV. It's on my CV. The other thing was, I got the question from faculty, and again, because of the nature of being in a bargaining unit and that sort of thing. Well, what's the catch? If you tell me that this is an independent credential, it's my own. I don't, what do I owe you after I'm done? And which is a fair question. Are you going to be calling me all the time and asking me to go give trainings around campus or whatever? And my answer to them was, I will take whatever you want to give me. If you want to do this training and have it just inform your practice, great. That's, you're better off, and the institution and our students are better off. If you want to share it within your department, fantastic. If you want to share it more broadly within your college, or if you want to, when we do internal sessions and you want to sit in to share best practices, that's great too. Whatever you want to do, and that was really appreciated by a lot of our faculty, that they weren't sort of committing to something after the training if they didn't necessarily want to. So anyway, this is the email, and again, I can certainly work with Nancy, or if anyone wants to contact me after the session, I'm willing to share any of the communications that we sent out to faculty. It seemed there was a lot of work that went into it, a lot of thought that went into it, and it worked pretty well. So I'm certainly willing to share that. So our experiences with the training, through these cohorts, we trained 56 faculty members across 5 cohorts. There were 2 in fall 2020, 1 in spring of 2021, 1 in summer of 2021, and 1 in fall of 2021. Maybe 56 sounds like a small number compared to 282, but that's way more than I thought we'd ever be able to do before the pandemic. It's, I don't know, roughly 20% or so of the faculty, which is a lot when you think about our context. So I was thrilled. Everyone within our executive management team and our provost office was thrilled with this. Complete honesty, retention of faculty was a challenge at times due to the rigor and the time commitment. It's a lot of work, and even when folks are warned up front, sometimes they would say, hey, look, this is too much. I have, personal commitments, and I'm doing it during the semester. It's just too much. The content did cover the QM standards. Obviously, that's what TOC training is. But I was very proactive with the facilitators to try to customize and kind of meet us where our faculty were. And I can get into that in a little bit more detail as well. That's one of the upsides about using the cohort approach, that you can say, hey, look, I'm not sure how this topic is going to work with our faculty. Can we try something? So I can get to that. How I leveraged my role as the Quality Matters coordinator at the institution was this whole concept of eating your own dog food. So I, even though I may have regretted it during some late nights, I told the faculty, hey, look, I'm so sure that this is going to go well and you're going to value the content, that I'll do the first cohort with the first 19 faculty that sign up. And I think there were some that were like, wow, if he's, he's not just tossing it to us and saying that we're going to love it with that. So I went in as a full participant to show that, hey, look, I don't have 100 hours to do this either, but I'll find it. And it's that important to our institution. I did talk to our facilitator, and with the cohorts, I want to say that we had the same facilitator for all 7 workshops, usually. We talked before each workshop and talked about specific needs of our faculty and where I thought there would be pitfalls maybe related to the content, where we, institutionally might not be where others are. And that helped a lot. An example that I can give of that is exploring your institution's policies is one of the, I think it's a week-long workshop. One issue with that is we didn't have a lot of robust policies related to online instruction. And the other one was that they were really hard to find on our website. So because we had those holes, I didn't want it to be just like an Easter egg hunt for a week, people trying to find things that either didn't exist or were hard to find. So I told the facilitator, hey, look, I'm going to have my instructional design staff pre-fill out some of these assignments for the workshop so that it's more about discussion and trying to figure out where the holes were in policy, as opposed to just like hunting for these things and getting really angry at us for asking people to find them. That was fantastic. And we used it for the rest of the cohorts. And again, that was one of the upsides of the cohort approach. Another question about QM peer reviewer certification. I'll get to that after this slide. One of the big things, in addition to the content, developing a common language and vision, the cohort really developed a common language for what quality instruction was about, what certain terms mean, how to go about different things, and kind of getting an agreement about, this is how you generate interest in a course, and this is how you assess students, and all of that. And it really showed us where we had to better align with best practices, looking at other institutions from examples of the policies or procedures, and that's within the content of these workshops, and really training these faculty to be champions or evangelists of quality matters principles. Just really quickly, and again, this is me talking, but I think those that went through the cohorts would agree. These cohorts were better when faculty were encouraged to experiment and make mistakes in front of each other and not, be sort of criticized or judged. And they really took up on that. They tried things that they weren't comfortable with, which was fantastic. Venting was another one, and that during COVID was not something that you had to pull out of people. But expressing frustration, I think, was really helpful within cohorts. Comparing with each other, again, folks saying, hey, look, I tried this, and maybe this would work for math, or maybe this would work for history or something. Opposition, I guess, is a nice way of saying, arguing or sort of dissenting, but within the comfort of a cohort really was helpful. Honesty, sometimes brutal honesty within a cohort was really helpful. Humor, and again, humor sometimes came out of frustration or desperation. And yes, even a little bit of cursing, maybe mild cursing, would be encouraged. But people really being honest with each other, and if they had a bad day in the classroom and then they were coming in to interact with this content, being honest about where they were. I don't want to blow through these slides, but I don't want to go over time either. One thing related to, I mentioned from an institutional change perspective, revisiting outdated policies, and to give you a sense of how outdated we're talking, our distance education policy at the time of the pandemic in 2020 had not been revised since 2004. And I think it's probably an understatement to say that there had been some developments in online instruction in the 18 years from 2004 to 2020. It was everybody knew that it was a problem, but it was something that was in front of us. So for example, as a result of the institutional policies workshop, we were able to identify what specifically we had to address. Those faculty that went through the training came into these committees and helped to form those, and we did make those updates in the last couple of years. That's huge, obviously, because it took us 18 years to accomplish. Another thing was common language and standards, agreeing before we move forward. We were using terminology in our policy, but it wasn't even relevant anymore. But what does hybrid mean? What does blended mean? What is, all of those things really came out of this and benefited our institution. I can go over this slide quickly. One thing that I've mentioned to Nancy and anybody else that will listen. So I was a couple years out of my PhD at the time of this training, which is why some of the hesitancy to commit to 100 hours of training. But I have to say, personally speaking, as an instructional designer by training and by trade, I had way more fun than I probably should have in these workshops. They're fantastic. They're solidly great. And I saw that, I think in the chat, someone mentioned this. solidly grounded in instructional design theory, and I absolutely mean that. Some, I won't name names, but some trainings on online instruction get into some of the more popular sort of pseudo research on instructional design, and it's not really well grounded. All of this was. As an example, the evaluating your course design really, I think by design, meets faculty where they are, and that was huge because that's early on in the sequence that we had. They used their own courses to develop their understanding as opposed to a hypothetical course. That kept faculty in the training and really kind of captured their interest. Connecting learning theories to your teaching strategies, again, as an instructional design geek, was fantastic, and it really generated a lot of conversations among the faculty. Getting toward the end, and we can do more Q&A, but in terms of recognizing completions, we made a huge deal out of this because of how much time was involved. We recognized them as such. So as soon as a cohort ended, within the day, I sent an email to the provost, copied all the participants and also my other VP, congratulating them, thanking them, telling them that I owed them, for the rest of my life for what they've done for the institution, and really meant it from the bottom of my heart because I had been in it with them and I knew what it took. The other thing that might not be as relevant, but just as an example of something we did, when our faculty went through the cohorts, there was an actual textbook that we bought 282 copies, and they're all over the place now. That author also had a second book. So what we did as part of recognition was we bought a copy of the other book by that author. The provost wrote a thank you within that book and put a hard copy letter that, again, faculty put in their promotion and tenure paperwork and that sort of thing. Sent that out to them. We did invite them back to the commitment idea, we invited them to university trainings and panel sessions. And as much as a lot of faculty said, well, I don't really want to have to do that, most of them did. And they were very enthusiastic about that. The other thing that, and I have the picture here, I just noticed this, I didn't realize, nobody said that they were going to do this, but faculty started to put the QM TOC badge in their email signatures, which was fantastic. And again, it was, I did all this work and I feel good about it. So I'm going to let everybody know, faculty and students and everybody else. I'll get to the Q&A question, but just to wrap up here, 100%, every single one of the faculty members that finished the certificate said it was worth their time. They probably said, I wouldn't want to do that again. Like right now, it was a lot of work, but I would absolutely recommend it, and it was worth my time. A lot of informal sharing that I've seen via email in committee meetings. They use the Zoom channels to share back and forth. That's been fun to watch. A lot of conversations about QM principles, and to get back to the whole idea of back to normal, whatever that means as we move out of a pandemic. QM principles, is, I think, a lot of people know, are applicable to all modalities, including face-to-face. And that's something that's been encouraging to see faculty talking about, hey, these things work everywhere. These concepts will work everywhere. So that's been great. 3 of the, 56 or whatever the total number was, left the university after completing the certificate. That's okay. I mean, that's probably the number that would have moved on anyway. And we told them it was portable, so they took it with them, and that's fine. Challenges and opportunities, and this is my last slide, and then I'll get to questions. One of the challenges is there is a little bit less urgency in terms of the pandemic imperative. Momentum has slowed. We certainly don't have as many people signing up as we did during the early cohorts. Recruiting faculty beyond the early adopters was, this is that sheet I was talking about when I was moving from the bottom to the top. I did get more no's than yeses when I got to a certain point. I actually got to a point where I thought, well, you know what? I'm tired of wondering whether I'm going to get a yes or no. I'll just go to the top of the list where I know that they're going to say no. And surprisingly, those people said yes. So we actually had some of the long timers that were opting into this. So, it was challenging, but I didn't let it get me down, and I just kept plugging away, and we kept filling cohorts. There is once you get sort of a little bit of it, like we're at 20% of the faculty, once you get that, then there's that whole, well, a bunch of faculty have done the training, other ones haven't, and then you have this little bit of a divide in terms of that common language and everything before they start to, spread it within the department, where there's kind of the haves and the have-nots. So that's a challenge that has to be overcome. Hopefully they convince other faculty to get involved, and they start to use these techniques and share them with others. The required and not to require, again, if you're at an institution with bargaining units, we still can't require it. So that's still a sort of an uphill battle in terms of convincing people to look at the benefits. In my mind, so we're to the point where, are we going to hit 282 or whatever our head count is now? No, we're not. But I have tried to sell the idea that, look, if we get at least one faculty member in a department certified, or one faculty member in a program certified, at least that can kind of start the groundwork where we spread this throughout, and then we can get, maybe 2 in each department and just keep moving on. The other thing is, institutionally, I've taken this to our executive management team and other groups. Quality Matters really is a way to differentiate yourself as an institution, whether it's course certification, moving on to that through Quality Matters, program certification. Quality Matters has institutions listed on their site that have that certification, and that's certainly a way to advertise programs. Hey, look, our faculty are QM certified, or our courses are QM certified. So that's an opportunity moving forward. So in summary, we had this need based on COVID and based on our experiences with Quality Matters. We went with TOC training. Faculty became champions. We established a common language, and that did lead to policy revisions, a new outlook, very much different from what I thought we would be doing in 2020 to 2022. The future of the training is a bit unclear in terms of this notion of returning to normal. There's a lot of faculty that just want to teach face-to-face and want COVID to go away. But I think it's an institutional imperative here, and obviously other places that we need to look at online and different modalities. So that, again, that's a challenge and an opportunity. Let me get to the couple questions before, I guess there's a little bit of time to open up. Wondering how your instructional designers were able to get QM peer reviewer certification. My understanding is that to be eligible to be a peer reviewer, you must have current 4-credit online teaching experience within the last 18 months. Do the ideas teach online somewhere else, or is there a different route to getting peer review? I'd have to remember, I haven't had a new instructional designer come on in a while. There are some, yeah, there's something before, I guess Nancy could help with this. There's something before, there's like a 2-part piece to the peer reviewer certification. And yes, the IDs that we had have taught other places. So I've had, like, we have a instructional designer now that is taught in the like the K-12 cyber school and that sort of thing. So I think we met those requirements a variety of ways. But again, Nancy can kind of fill in the blanks in terms of what's required. Another question from Nancy Carr. How do you recommend working to get faculty on board with QM if there is no clear message from above that it is important, and some faculty are concerned that the framework will interfere with academic freedom? Yeah, I've heard those things before. I'd say no clear message from above. That is tough, obviously, and this imperative from the president because of COVID is something that we latched onto because we didn't have a clear message from above with previous administrations. So that's ideal. If you don't have it, one thing that we've seen both before and since this taking on this initiative is we have certain departments or programs that are a little bit ahead of others. So I'm trying to think of like our psychology department. They had a master's program that was very focused on, I think it was psychological science. Their numbers were going down. So they knew that they had to both look at program revisions to make it a little bit more applied, but also look at online delivery. Making friends with those faculty that are on the leading edge of that and moving programs. We've done sort of the grassroots thing there as well. So starting with those faculty, and they have lunch with faculty and departments that maybe aren't as progressive. So we've taken it from both the top and the bottom. That's something that I would certainly recommend if there's, in the absence of a message from the top, is to go after the early adopters, like I did with my spreadsheet, working from the bottom and knowing I know these people are going to say yes no matter what. But I certainly wouldn't trivialize that situation, because it's not easy. The academic freedom thing, that's certainly something that we've encountered here. It's certainly taken seriously with working with a faculty that's in a bargaining unit. Academic freedom comes up all the time. Because they're in a bargaining unit here, and again, I think it's different at other institutions. They own their intellectual property. They own the course content. They don't want, we don't share courses. Like I don't reassign a course to someone else that didn't develop the content, because that's an intellectual property issue. It really, that's kind of like a straw man argument. Like it's an excuse, honestly. I mean, nothing about quality matter, but that is something that you definitely have to talk through with them and say, look, this isn't going to infringe upon academic freedom at all. You can, you're still teaching whatever you want to teach, however you want to teach. This is all about design and delivery of online instruction, and it's agnostic to the content. There really isn't any reason to worry about that. That does take some reassuring, and I think what I would do again there is have the faculty that willingly took the training convince the ones that are worried about that no one's going to infringe upon your academic freedom if you do this training. But that is something that was mentioned in our situation as well. Oh, I forgot I put this in here. Shout outs. This story has been told in many different ways or presented in different ways. Scott Gallagher is our primary instructional technologist. He is fantastic. And I owe a lot to him with this implementation. And also Mark Schimmel, who is now at Carnegie Mellon, but was at Shippensburg. He was our director of distance education at the time. So those two, I wouldn't take sole credit for any of this. They had a lot to do with our success in this endeavor. So Nancy, I left a whopping minute. So I don't know if there's other.
That's fine, Justin. We can handle it. Thanks everyone for attending today. And Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience with our other members. Like I've always said, you all learn as much from each other as you do from us. So you're the ones in the trenches, you're the ones doing the work. And so you learn from each other. I just wanted to, can you stop your screen share?
Yep.
Okay. I just want to go over a couple of more things here. Next month's QM Success Stories is Tiny Trickles to Wondrous Waterfalls. One strategy impacts several disciplines. That'll be on September 21st. And we also, here is the verification of attendance. So if you need to take a screenshot of that and indicate that you have attended, you're welcome to do that. And I'll go back to this in just a second, but whoops, I think I skipped one. All right, I'll go back to that slide in just a second. I missed one here. We had, after the pandemic started, we began offering the Applying the Quality Matters rubric workshop in a virtual format in either a full day or a half day. And so those were only for institutions who wanted a dedicated session, but we've started offering those publicly now. So if you find that 2 weeks is a difficult time for you to take an online workshop, we do have these scheduled in one full day or 2 half-day sessions, September, October, November, December, and they are available on the website, and I do have the URL there for you. And then back to the verification of attendance slide again. So again, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Justin. And we look forward to seeing everyone again next month.
Nancy, did you want me to stick around? Is there any
No, you're free to go.
debrief? Okay, all right.
Yep.
I
Thank
put in
you.
the chat. Absolutely. I put in the chat that folks can contact me. If anyone sends you anything directly, feel free to redirect them to me. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. We appreciate that because, yeah, a lot of people do have questions afterwards, and we appreciate your willingness to do that. So
Absolutely.
thanks again. Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Have a
good
wonderful
afternoon.
afternoon, everyone.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Take care.